Okay, I'm sorry that I was gone today. I know you're all going to miss me so very much. But we are going to go over just a few things so we don't fall super far behind the other class. And if I start laughing, it's not my fault. It's because my husband's here and he's watching me. It makes me feel weird. But we are, oh, see, he's looking at me now. Anyway, we are going to start talking about the Whiskey Rebellion today. So on Friday, we had our Hamilton versus Jefferson debate. If you did not fill this out already, then that is what you need to do. So the sub can pause this video if she needs to or he needs to. I don't know who I have yet, so whoever it is, good luck. But make sure that you fill these out. So if you argued for Hamilton, you could put his name right here and write down your 3 main ideas that you came up with your debate. And then if you can pair up with somebody, if you can find the same person, that's awesome. Otherwise, it's totally fine. Just find somebody else. But somebody with Jefferson, you put their name right here, and they would tell you what their 3 main ideas are, and you need to fill those in. Or vice versa, if you were Jefferson and Hamilton. So if you need to do that, that is a great time. Do that right now. If you have already done that, I know in a couple of the hours we already finished that. So with that, we are going to move on and talk about the Whiskey Rebellion. When we listened to the song on Friday, it talked about the taxing their whiskey. And this is what it's referring to. So we've got lovely Hamilton up here in the corner. Definitely one of the best looking founding fathers. But in 1789, Congress passes what's called a protective tariff. And a tariff, that just means a tax. So the point of this tariff, a protective tariff, is it is protecting American-made goods. So they place an extra tax on any goods coming from Europe. And the point of doing this is to try and encourage Americans to buy American-made goods. So for instance, when it's Christmas time, you see a lot of the signs up along Main Street in Brigham, and it says shop local on them. It's kind of the same thing. They're trying to encourage you to shop local so that you can hopefully promote the businesses that are close to you rather than just finding whatever's cheapest. We're not very good at that now. Mainly everything we buy is from China, so we didn't quite follow that through. But regardless, it's always the goal is to try and get you to buy more American-made goods. So what Hamilton does, after they've passed this protective tariff, is he pushes an excess tax, which means, and this is going to be something you need to know about the Whiskey Rebellion, an excess tax is a tax on a product's manufacture, sale, or distribution. So instead of taxing the whiskey itself, they tax the other side of things. So they tax whoever is manufacturing the whiskey, they tax whoever is going to sell the whiskey, and they tax whoever is distributing the whiskey. So even though that doesn't mean that whoever's buying the whiskey has to pay more, because everybody else has to pay more because of this tax, the price of the whiskey goes up. And very quickly, Hamilton and everybody else learns that you do not mess with Americans and their whiskey. A lot of these whiskey producers were just small frontier farmers, so their major crop was corn. That's one of the easiest things that they could grow over there. And one problem with it is that they were farmers on the other side of the Appalachians, so on the western side, closer to where we live, or on that side of the Appalachian Mountains. One problem with corn is that it is heavy. And because it was so heavy to carry across the Appalachians, they tried to find a different way to sell all of this corn that they were producing. So instead, they make it into whiskey because you make more money off of whiskey and it is so much easier to transport than just these cartloads of corn. So it's all of these farmers who are making their living off of selling this whiskey. Now, this makes the farmers absolutely furious because of the Whiskey Rebellion. They refuse to pay the tax. They are not going to pay this tax to the government, who's just, in their eyes, trying to screw them over. So instead, when all of these marshals come to try and force them to pay the tax, they beat up the marshals, and in typical American fashion, they threaten to secede from the Union, because that is always the first thing in America is to rebel. Hamilton doesn't really get deterred by this, and he turns to Washington and says, hey, look, this is just an opportunity for us. So I guess that's the positive side of things, but in his eyes, it was just an opportunity for the government to show its force. So when I ask you about the Whiskey Rebellion on a test, hint, hint, then you're going to know that the purpose of the Whiskey Rebellion is it was a way for America to show how strong it was. This was the first time that America was really able to show how strong it was and what kind of military force it had. And this is also the first time after they have created the actual government, after we've gone through the Articles of Confederation that changed to the Constitution. Now we have a real government that is up and running. This is the first time that government has had an opportunity to really show what it is capable of. So Alexander Hamilton and George Washington gather up their troops, their militiamen, and they march over to the Appalachian Mountains and basically just show them who's boss, and all the rebels just scatter away and no lives are lost. So it ends up happy in the end. But that is the Whiskey Rebellion. So what I want you to do right now, the sub will probably have to pause the video for however long it takes you guys. I'm assuming about 1 minute is just about right. And on this line, you've got this line in your notes. And if for some reason I skipped it, I don't think I did, but if I did, then fine, you're smart. You guys can figure out somewhere else to write it. So you need to write down, why was the Whiskey Rebellion important? Write it down in your own words, and you have about 1 minute. So if the sub wants to pause the video, do so now. Really quickly, we are going to just go over the French Revolution, and then we are going to end for the day. But we also have a problem. Ugh, my husband's making eyes at me again. He's watching The Office, and he's definitely much more entertained than he would be if he was listening to me. But that's okay. You guys can listen about the French Revolution instead of that. So over in France, we're switching back over there. They hear about the Revolutionary War. They come and help us fight in the Revolutionary War. They send over Marquis de Lafayette. And they are really inspired by everything that we did. And after they signed a treaty with us to help fight in the war, they assumed that as soon as they started their revolution, that we would come back over and we would help them fight theirs as well. Now, America's really split on the issue. A lot of Americans wanted to support the British because that's where we came from, and the British were really against the French Revolution. I'll explain that in a minute as to why. So some Americans want to support the British. Some Americans want to support the French, and then you have George Washington, who is just down the middle. He really doesn't know what to do. He's got a country that's totally divided on this issue of if we should support the French Revolution. I have this video, but it's a song, and it's really cheesy. So I'll show it when I get back, because I want to see your faces, I guess. But, excuse me. Instead, I'm just going to kind of go through and tell you guys a little bit about the French Revolution, and we will talk more about the video when I get back. But the French Revolution, it's a lot of really terrible things that happen, but basically they overthrow the monarchy. That's where King Louis and his wife, Maria Antoinette, they're the ones in charge. That's where the saying, "let them eat cake," comes from, because they said that Maria Antoinette was just having all these grand parties and all the people in France were just suffering as a result. So that's kind of where that saying comes from. She never actually said that, but it is a saying that we still hear today. But basically what happens is that everybody's upset, a lot of really detailed stuff happens, and they're able to eventually overthrow King Louis and his wife, and they chop their heads off, so that's really grand. This is when the guillotine was invented. So it was supposed to be a painless way of getting rid of people's lives. So I don't know. We'll talk about that when I get back to you. But they chop off their heads, and this other guy named Robespierre takes over, and he starts what's called the Reign of Terror. And basically what happens then is he executes anybody who he thinks is not upholding the new government. And then they have another group of people take over, and it's a group of 5 men who end up taking over, and they're trying to rule that way. And that doesn't work. And eventually somebody else takes over, and they find the son of Maria Antoinette and King Louis and put him back in power. So it's just a lot of great stuff going on. If you have seen Les Mis, this is a different revolution. That revolution happens later on. This is the first French Revolution. So there is your really brief gist of the French Revolution. I took a semester-long class on this, and it still just has so much that happened that it's impossible to explain in 5 minutes. So I will show you guys the video, and we will write down 3 events that happened in the video. So after Washington kind of sees all this stuff going on in France, and all these people in France are trying to get Washington to sign a treaty, he looks at the British side of things. And the British are looking at this and saying, in France, they're trying to overthrow monarchy. And then they declare war on every monarch in Europe. And after that happens, Britain feels like they are personally being attacked by the French. So the French are basically attacking, and this is about the time, about this time when Washington is really trying to come up with his opinion on the whole thing. This is when Napoleon Bonaparte takes over. So I guess I kind of skipped him in my little story, but that's okay. Napoleon Bonaparte takes over right after the Reign of Terror. And regardless, when that whole thing's going on, Napoleon Bonaparte is the one who is going all over Europe trying to take over all of these monarchs. And then he declares himself dictator. So it's just a huge jumbled mess going on over in France. Now, Washington decides that America is going to stay neutral. And he is not going to support either the French or the British, because the British were asking us to support them too, because they wanted to make sure that we were on their side, even though, yes, we were against monarchs, we came from Britain, and so we should support them. And France said that they had helped us out in our war, so we should support them. But to Washington, he said that we would be signing a treaty to nobody, because there was really no clear leader of France. And we're a brand new nation. He really didn't feel like war was in our best interest. So Washington drafts the Declaration of Neutrality. And if you've listened to Hamilton, there is a song about this. And if I feel like you guys can handle more songs, I will show it to you when I get back. After this happens, Jefferson resigns from Secretary of State. First, because he feels like his feud with Hamilton is just becoming too much. And second, because he really supported the French Revolution. And he was kind of upset that we weren't willing to support it. And he decides later that he is going to run for president. So a combination of all those result in Jefferson resigning as Secretary of State. Phew, that was a long slide, and I'm sorry you guys didn't have very many notes on that. We'll talk about it more when I get back, though. And we're going to skip that right now. Oh, and look, that is the end. So I'm going to stop it. After this, go ahead and work on your study guide. If you do not have a chapter, then I put it on the front desk as well. It's the yellow chapter. And for first hour, at least, your study guide should be coming. I took them down to the office last week, so they should be up here by the end of the hour. If not, I guess make one up. It's fine. So be good, children. I will see you all tomorrow.